Citibank or whoever the other job were coming. And I am Calcutta, I remember out there, 120 odd people, 115 people applied for an interview. So we decided basically because we were paying so much money and we had no idea how many people we wanted. Shiv and I said, look, we'll question the guy. If I have to turn to you or you have to turn to me to get a clarification, then it's a reject. So we ended up recruiting 6 people who 1 year later became regional managers and ran our regions for us. And actually, all of them who are around are doing really well. Now, most of them have retired. Some, are CEOs and chairmen of different companies. But I think ultimately, if you look back, the people who joined the IT industry in those days were the risk takers. And all of them have done well. All with the wrong word, most of them, I should say, have done really well. And it's, and I'm completely spoiled because I'm used to working with people who are smarter than me. That's how we used to recruit them. And so you don't have to micromanage them at all. You actually tell them, I want this done. They'll do it far smarter and better than you would do it. And so when I went to the US, I had a real problem. And I was told by my sales manager there, my US sales manager, when he was sort of going back to Chicago, he had some medical issue. In his exit interview, he told me I'm an intellectual snob. I thought, no one's ever called me a snob. So I sort of asked him why. He said, because you expect people to think at your, the way you, at your pace. And the salespeople here need to be micro-instructed a lot more. And I had to tell him that, look, I'm used to working with people who are smarter than me. So I used to have to catch up with them when I told them something. And, it is different here, which is, one of the big problems we had in our early days. Because people with an IIT IIM degree in the US would get paid a lower salary than the local guy who was a BA or something. And they were far smarter and stuff. And that's why a lot of people initially left, even companies like TCS and stuff, and went off on their own. And that's one reason why so many of them are doing so well there. Because, they're really smart people who went there. Which is why you see, I think, I was reading somewhere today, 30% of the CEOs of the world's top 500 companies are Indians. That's a scary number when you look at it, right? If it's true, I presume, nowadays you don't know, there's so much fake news going around. So yeah, so I did 23 years with HCL. 10 years into HCL, I started getting bored. I thought, the company had grown to 2,000 people. In fact, I'll give you another little story. So when we started, we pooled all our money together. We had 1.75 lakhs. Now, Bombay was the big market. 60% of India's taxes were paid from Bombay. And so you could not be a computer company and not have an office in Bombay. Unfortunately, you couldn't rent offices in Bombay. You had to buy them because the Bombay Rental Act was so strange that if you rented it for more than X period of time, you became the indirect owner. So what we ended up doing was buying a 953 square foot office in Cuff Parade for 1,25,000. And so the working capital in the HCL started was 50,000. Right. 10 years later, we had become a biggish company. We all got together at Lake Palace in Udaipur celebrating 10 years and stuff. And, when we reminisced about what had happened, our return on that 125 was better than our return on the 50. So that was India in those days. It was, and we were the largest computer company in the country. But talking about myself, I had what I now realized, or what I realized after I went out, was a midlife crisis. So 10 years later, I was thinking to myself, what am I doing? I was getting to be near 40. When you leave college, you want to change the world. I thought, yeah, half my life is over. I haven't changed the world. And what am I doing? Chasing money? I'm, running after this company, blah, blah, blah. So I told my people, I bought a little cottage in Missouri. I said, I'm going to go there. I'll work from there for 3 or 4, 6 months. I'll decide what I want to do in life and then I'll come back. And everyone told me, they were smart. They said, look, you'll be as confused 3, 6 months later as you are now. So why don't you go do a program in a management school, which might help you clear up your head. So I went and did what is called the Advanced Management Program at the Harvard Business School. I still don't know how I got in because the minimum criteria to get in was $300 million of revenue. We were an 80 crore company at that time. I think the commas being at the wrong place confused the hell out of them. Yeah, because when I went there, I sort of realized that, everyone else was talking $1 billion. And, the realization came that when people talked about $1 billion, I used to get a little shaken up. What are you going to do with this? But when people talked about managing 1,000 people, I was very comfortable, whereas they used to get very shaken. But how do you manage so many people? And so I realized that was the difference between what we did in India and what they were doing in the US and most of Western Europe and stuff. But yeah, the good news is I got time to think about it. I got time to talk to people who I felt had no agenda. They didn't know me or didn't know my history and stuff. And I realized what I was missing was the fun of a startup. I didn't want to run a big. That was boring. So I came back and I said, look, don't change whoever's doing my job when I was away, let them continue. I'll take on all your new initiatives. And everyone said, okay, that's great. But there's a caveat to that. You can't only have fun. So if any division runs into a problem, then you have to take care of that, which I thought was only fair. I mean, I can't just do what I want. And so I got in, we started a new setup called the CAD/CAM division, which was really good because I went back to my engineering roots and that got quite successful. We had a retrographics division that ran into a problem. Basically, we were selling copiers. Modi Xerox was selling copies. And at some point, that market changed completely. From making the profit, we ended up making a loss and the losses started multiplying. So I had to take over the retrographics division. And then we had to do a lot of things to turn it around. New products, motivate people, all the usual stuff. But then we had got, okay. So we had, because India was part of the Soviet bloc, we were not getting the latest chipsets. They would get announced, but because they had to be cleared by the US to come to India, because India was aligned with Russia, the East Soviet bloc, so to say, they weren't getting cleared. But everyone in India reads those English magazines. So they wanted the latest chipsets in their computers, and we couldn't give it to them. So we decided to do it differently. We went multi-processor. Instead of giving single processor, to give them the power. So the 68,000 chip from Motorola, it became 68,010,020,030. So on the 10 and 20, we made it multi-processor. And because we had Unix sources, we were able to give the operator as if he was operating a single CPU Unix machine, but there were multiple CPUs inside that took care of the processing and did it a lot faster. You had a lot more terminals, all that stuff. AT&T had bought Unix, and one of the AT&T VPs had come into a Computer Society of India exhibition, and he saw this, and he was really impressed. He said, why don't you guys come to the US? Because their MIPS and Pyramid are selling the Unix multiprocessor for $1 million, whereas you should be at that point. For $1 million, you should be able to sell it for about 100,000. So we got McKinsey to do a market study for us. They came out positive. And so end of 1988, we opened what is called HCL America. Then it's now we call it HCL Technologies. But that's what we opened. And as soon as a few months after it opened, one of our founders, Yogesh Vaidya, who'd gone there, had to go for a bypass. And bypasses weren't too common in those days. Because he called and said that I'll be back in office in 10 days and all that stuff. And we thought he was trying to overstretch himself. So I was in between projects at that time. So I was told to go there and take over the company. And what had also happened is we got a $50 million order from a company called Fortune Systems, OEM order. And we were adapting our machine to their the way they wanted. When they got bought by a company called SCI, who wanted only Intel chip-based machines, not Motorola chip-based machines. So suddenly that order became a piece of paper. Now, if I lived in the US, I would have gone legal and probably made a lot of money. But when you go from India, legal is the last thing on your mind. Because you don't know when the case will get decided. You don't want to see the inside of a court. You don't want to talk to a lawyer. So when I went there, I decided I was sent there to shut down the company quietly and come back to India, get the team back to India. What had happened was when you want to sell something in the US, the enabling technologies have to be ported on the machine. So you've got to get things like you've got to get UL certification. You've got to get your databases on the machine. You've got to get your compilers on the machine that are used in the US. And normally when you want to do that, you have to pay for porting, right? Our deal with them was, mine is not a simple port. I need to do multiprocessor extensions on your software and then port it on my machine. So I'll give you the R&D engineers to do that, but I won't pay you for the porting, but the engineers are at my cost. So when I decided to get out of hardware, I called up all these people and said, hey, I'm taking my engineers back. I don't need the porting anymore. Every one of them said, we need those extensions on our software. I'll pay you for the engineers. And so suddenly I had a cash flow, I had a business, and that's what market capped at 33 billion today. It's called HCL Technology. But that's still, forget what's taught in the business schools about strategic thinking and blah, blah. That's really how it happened. So that's how 23 years in HCL, when I turned 50, I was traveling 20-25 days a month when I was here. And so I remember on my wedding anniversary, my wife, I think it was my 10th wedding anniversary, she told me it's actually a third because she had counted the days when I was in town. So I decided at 50 that I might as well sort of stay back and spend some time and make up for lost time. And I missed my kids growing up, it's the usual issue. So it took me a year and a half to work my way out of HCL. I wanted to do it amicably, which is very difficult to do in India. Brothers fight brothers, the usual stuff. But I did manage to get out amicably. I lasted 10 days. My wife sort of threw me out of the house. She basically said, we've been married for 27 years. I married you for good or bad, but I didn't marry you for much. And bottom line was, she said, you keep saying, why is this here? Why is that there? I said, hey, it's so she said, I'll pay for a business center for my budget. You go work from there. So that's how we ended up starting another company, because I had a number of other friends who came in there. We said, where is this industry going to go in 10 years? Why don't we think we know where it's going to go? Why don't we set up design that model and set it up now so that 10 years later we'll be ahead of everyone else. And so the thinking was that what we were doing was largely labor arbitrage. A large part of it is labor arbitrage because they're much cheaper in India than they're in the US. So we thought, instead of doing that, why don't I do consulting? Why don't I discuss the business problem with the business guys? Not give a Java programmer to the CIO, but discuss a business problem with the business guys and then leverage technology to provide the solution. So I become agnostic to technology. And I can't do it to the whole universe. Let's go in one small vertical or one vertical and become an expert in that. So forget the process, but we ended up choosing the capital markets, investment banking, and said, let's focus on that. And that's what we did at Headstrong. And we grew the company to 220 odd million. When we got an offer, we couldn't refuse. In since I would have refused it, but all my other founders, co-founders, were first-time entrepreneurs. And they were going to make a lot of money when we sort of sold to Genpact. And so in 2011, May 2011, we sold to Genpact. And I decided after that I said, the only thing I really know is technology. So I said, let me see if we can leverage technology to to provide better outcomes in healthcare and education to the economically underprivileged in India. And so I work with a number of startups. I work with some in technology, AI and stuff, but most of them are in either healthcare or education. And most of them have some kind of social, some part of their work is social impact. I am a great believer in not going out with a begging bowl all the time. So I want companies to show me a path to profitability or to show me a path to positive cash flow so that over a period of time, we make it self-sustaining. And that's what I've been doing. It's been a fun journey. In fact, the problem is my wife's now fighting with me that you're spending too much time working because now I don't have a team. I have to do it all myself. And working between the US and India, when I'm in the US, I get calls morning and evening. When I'm in India, I get calls morning and evening with the other side. And so it's quite crazy, that whole setup. Like I was supposed to go out for dinner this evening and I suddenly realized I have 2 calls, so I can't. So the dinner is going to come home. So, but that's one thing I haven't found. I've got to be very honest. I've tried my whole life to find a work-life balance. In my view, it doesn't exist. But if anyone finds it, please let me know. I haven't been able to figure it out. I also think it's a moving target. Because because when I came back from Harvard, the very thing about I got to be home at 5 o'clock and all that stuff, it was still not enough. I figured I just better get back to the normal. So, it's a question, that's the moving target. If you spend more time at home, you're expected to spend even more time. And so it's just find a balance that works for you. In occasional fights, but it tends to be okay. I'm sorry, that's one thing everyone asks. I haven't found it. So that's pretty much me. That's what I've been doing. One more thing I want to say is I was asked on my 60th birthday, which is a long time back, if I regretted, if I could live my life again, what would I change? And I was quite happy to think the only thing I wanted to change was I wish my parents were still around. But other than that, I couldn't think of anything I wanted to change. So I think a great way to look at life. That I've done all the shaitani I wanted, I've done all the stuff I wanted to do. I'm happy. I'd love to answer questions because that way I know what I'm just blabbing about myself. But yeah.
So I just wanted to ask you how were you able to detach yourself from something that you created? I'm talking about your business. So in Indian context, there is this thinking that I created something, so that's my baby, and I'll be keeping it with me and then passing on to my children. That's largely what is there. But there are also people who make something and then sell it off and start something and then sell that off again, and that cycle goes on.
Yeah, so I want to tell you, with Headstrong, I didn't have that feeling at all. It was something, I knew it was something we created that we were going to find a home for it at some stage. A part of me is still there in HCL. I haven't been able to take it out. I don't know how to describe it, but she's still my baby. The things HCL has done that I think are unfair to me, but I would never take them legal or anything because I just feel that that's the way it is. Yes, you're right. It's I gave 23 years of my life, from 25 to about 48, 49 to HCL, and it was my life. I mean, I don't know how to describe this. I've slept on, like, I remember going to Dhanbad to sell to the Indian School of Mines, and I missed the train back, the Goldfield or Black Diamond, I forget which one comes back at night, and you have to buy a first class ticket to get onto any of the mails and expresses. And of course, you didn't have the money in those days. So me and one of my IIM Calcutta guys, we slept on one guy on the platform, one guy on the bench, and half the night then we swapped over till the morning train, and then we took the morning train back to Calcutta. So, one of the things that used to happen was not everyone grows with the company. So there were some of our early salespeople who didn't really become managers. So we had to at some stage get managers from outside. And so when I used to go to Calcutta, there was an emotional bond with some of these guys who are still salesmen, or whatever you call them. But that emotional bond didn't exist with the regional manager. And so you go and sit on his table, have a cup of coffee and job or stuff. You go to his home, have dinner because you did that when you were starting the company. The managers used to feel very uncomfortable. So you had to actually tell them that, hey, I can't change it. That's a relationship. I told him, you come and sleep with me on the railway station, maybe we'll have that relationship. But, I can't change it. It's just that was one of the toughest things when the company grew, was how you were able to maintain that, to be boss and friend at the same time. I think that's one of the most difficult, but one of the nicest things that can happen in terms of culture in the company. But I think HCL that way was very special. We were able to, I'm going to tell you the temptations were there. When the company started doing well, taxes were at 70% in India in those days. In 1 year, it was 104%. So you always thought, let me make some black money, because otherwise, how the hell do I go have a meal unless the company pays for it in one of these big 5-star hotels and stuff? Two things. One is no one buys a computer for cash. So creating cash would have been a problem. Second thing is, because we were scattered all over, we had put in a very tight control system, because we said most problems come up between partners because someone thinks, oh, he's got his wife wearing those diamonds, can't say all that kind of nonsense. Fortunately, the wives were friends, so that didn't. But we put in very strict controls. And the most important part was people were joining us because they felt we were a professional company and transparent. And you didn't want to kill the goose that was laying the golden egg, so to say. So we just decided we'll run it as a professional company. And when I look back, I think the biggest achievement a company like HCL had was that it largely made the IT industry in India grow as a professional company. Indian companies weren't known to be professional. Even DCM, generally, Mr. Vinay Balram was called Lalaji. And so that's how you sort of referred to the whole thing. And you had to, because you're getting taxed at that crazy level, people were taking cash out of the system and not paying tax on it. That in a company like HCL didn't happen at all. And, fortunately, that's the way the IT industry grew, which is one reason why I think it's what it is today. So when people ask me what's the greatest achievement, I point to that. And I think now I can add a second one, that Indians used to get no respect earlier. That programmer has got us that respect. Now, the minute you go somewhere, the first thing they talk about is IT, science and math, and they accept you're smarter than them in that area. Anyone else? Oh, good. I must have been very clear there.
Yeah. So you mentioned about the error in commas that actually opened the door for Howard. So when you initially mentioned that you though had a strength of managing thousands of people in the company. So when you sort of have a strength of your own, you sort of a USP of your own, when you are working with a lot of people around who have expertise in different spaces. So how did you, like, two questions there. So one is, how did you sort of build your learning journey there? And second, because like we are also halfway through our course now, we don't know where will we land after July. So what is the advice that you would, or suggestion that you would give to us to leverage our strengths in whatever spaces we fall into?
Yeah, I think both the questions have one answer. The press tends to show companies as one person. So Larry Ellison, Oracle, Tesla, Musk, that's completely bullshit. A company is done by lots of people, and mainly people down the line are the ones who are doing all the work. It's very difficult for press to write about a group of people doing things, which is one reason why they don't write about Japanese companies. Right? They never point out a CEO in Japan, because in Japan it is a group culture. That's true in most other companies. But the US is so individualistic that that's how they pointed out. So I think the biggest strength you have, or the biggest strength you can have, is if you can motivate people to do what, and there are two things. So, everyone wants to become a manager. In my view, that's the toughest job in the world. For two reasons. One is I have a team with me. My job is to supplement the weakest person in that team. So I can't choose what I want to do or what I would like to do. My choice is made by who is the weakest person in my team and how do I supplement that strength? How do I supplement him to make sure the team is strong? So first thing is I don't have that. I can't choose what I want. My team forces that decision on. Second thing is when we are given a job as a team, and let's say the team fails in doing that job, and the guy who was supposed to do the job in my team is with me, and we've gone to my boss, and my boss starts yelling at him, firing him. It's my job as a manager to step in between and say, my team, my fault. You want to yell at anyone, you yell at me. Not too many people do that, by the way. It's unfortunate. But if you do that, that guy will try his best never to let you down. The second part is you do something really well, you go with the guy who's done it, and the boss is praising you, you've got to step out of the way and say, that's the guy who did it. So he feels very good about it. I think most managers tend to forget that that's the way they've got to manage. And if you do it that way, people will find it very difficult to say no to you when you ask them to do something. In fact, the other thing you got to keep in mind, if someone does say no, then you do it. So that the guy feels ashamed that he said no to, he or she said no to you. Don't ask them to do something unreasonable. And don't ask someone like, we didn't think it was unreasonable to ask a guy to catch a train in the next hour and go to Gorakhpur or wherever, if there was a customer who wanted it done. But in those days, I wouldn't ask a girl to do it because it's not safe to take the overnight train. That would be unfair for me to ask to do that. But any of my guys, that's the way it was. I don't want to hear excuses about I couldn't get a ticket, I don't have a reservation. Not my problem. You can't do it, let me know, I'll do it. When we had that problem in Punjab with the terrorists, I don't know how many of you ever remember that? No. Well, there was a problem in Punjab with terrorists at one time, the Khalistan stuff. We had LIC, we had bought machines from HCL nationally, and they wanted those machines serviced in Punjab. And parents didn't want their young service engineer kids to go there. The supervisors had to step in and take care of those machines. That's how we did it. I remember getting calls at midnight from some guy who stopped in a bus because he's carrying a screwdriver and a repair kit, and the police guy thinks he's a terrorist because he's got that, and then calling up from there to get, say, no, he's okay, he's a service engineer kind of thing. But yeah, that's the way we built that culture, that's the way we built HCL. And that's the way it ran. And so no one ever, how do I put it? Nothing was considered impossible. So HCL, we grew 10x every 6 years. So we did 1 to 10 in 6 years, 10 to 100 in 6 years, 100 to 1,000 in 6 years. And then when we were 1,000 crores, we decided to go up to take the management team up to Kathmandu. And we said, now we got to go to 10,000. And on the flight up, everyone was telling me, are we crazy? And how are we going to do it and stuff. So after 3-4 days in Kathmandu, when we did that, told them the plans and blah, blah, blah. On the flight back, people are talking to me and saying, why are we being so conservative? We should be 13,000 crores. Why are we doing only 10,000? So that was sort of the culture that HCL had. To answer your question of wherever you work, just make sure you treat people like human beings. I think that's one of our biggest problems in India, is we tend to look at people in a, how do I put it? When you go to an office, you treat the peon like he's a subhuman. Or you treat a clerk like he's not your equal. It's your attitude, the way you speak to them. I think if you, in India, that's the easy thing. If you treat people as equals, they'll go out of their way to help you. Not everyone, some people are different, but most people will do that. The other thing I wanted to mention was, I used to find it worked for me. So let's say I went to IIT Delhi to sell computers, you're roaming around in the sun the whole day. At lunchtime, everyone's gone for lunch. The only place in those days where you got cold water was in the director's office because there used to be a refrigerator there. So you'd go up and talk to the director's PA and he'd script like hell, but he'd give you the water, right? And so at 5, 6 o'clock in the evening, when you're going back home, the director is still going to be there. So just go up. I used to go up to the office and go to the PA and say, thank you. Just that. If I ever wanted a 15-minute gap to get a requisition signed to get the order done, the PA would find me that time between meetings. Right? Because people in India don't say sorry and thank you. For some reason, the big ego issue. It's like dipping your lights on the highway. I mean, it is a big ego issue, and just simple things make you more effective in India. At least used to be in my time. I haven't gone to the field and sold for a bit, but that makes all the difference. Collect your payment quickly, whatever you need to do, just simple things. Don't overdo it, just make it natural. And, people reciprocate. So just a simple thing like that. If you're working in India, it's just, and if you do go out to our rural areas, and again, I've got to say, I had no idea. I've lived in the city my whole life. When I started working with some of these NGOs that work in rural areas, India is not one country. It's actually 2 countries. What goes on in rural, and sometimes you feel, I guess you can blame them. Our politicians had 70 years to make changes. They haven't done a damn thing. It just, I don't know how to put it. It's just not fair that you have so many people living the way they've been living for so long, just because the religion says it's fate, you were born, you did something in your last life and you're doing the thing in this life, not okay. And that's how they survive, otherwise we'd have a revolution in this country. But I think you've got to go and see what the villages are like. And, you'll when you go there and work, you will find changing things. It's going to take a long. They don't trust you. For one, if you go to the city, and you have to find a way of getting the community involved. We were talking about it a little earlier today. Sorry, that was a long answer to a short question. Yeah, go ahead.
We've seen India actually go through a crazy evolutionary journey. You miss anything of the 50s, 60s, 70s? You feel that there were certain things that were better during that time versus now? That's one question. The other is, what is it when you look at society around you today? What is it that really bothers you?
So both the answers have one. Both the questions have one answer. I miss the simplicity of life. I miss the simple things. Today, I can't say something without people misunderstanding. Right? I can't, at least in the US, I can't compliment a woman or a girl in the office and say that color looks good on you, because I might get slapped with a case of harassment of some kind or whatever. That wasn't true in our time. You could say what you wanted as long as you were genuine and you weren't troubling people and stuff like that. So basically, that's one thing I really miss from the simplicity that life had in those days. You didn't have to look over your shoulder or worry about what you said all the time. Obviously, you wouldn't say things that were completely different of Gali Dinner and all that, but that one. And the other part of the question was,
when you look around you.
Yeah, the art, again, the artificiality. I hate the stuff where you go to a social gathering in Delhi and they say, oh, hello. That's it. And so I get into trouble all the time, because when we do go to these parties, I end up sitting at one place and talking about, Aristotle's a little heavy, but talking about Durant and, with one person. And God forbid if I'm talking to a lady, then I get a yelling on my way back home. I've been married 51 years, so it's nothing changed. But yeah, so that's what I tend to do. And I've discovered, I get into trouble all the time. My wife keeps telling me, when you're selling, you used to talk to so many people, you go out of your way and said, you buy something from me, I'll still do it. But otherwise, so I think that's what I find strange. And so that's why and most people gravitate back to their old friends from school and college. Because then they know agendas, you can sit down, talk about anything, they can say anything to you, they don't mean it in a bad sense. And that's fine. In fact, again, my wife cribs about the fact that, hey, you haven't met this guy for 30 years and suddenly you know each other your whole life. Then of course, we went to school together. We of course know each other our whole life. But I've done stuff with him that I can't even discuss with you.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Hi, sir. So my question is regarding HCL. So in the 1990s, early 2000s, when things started opening up due to liberalization, there would have been a sudden competition, right, from the rest of the world that you must have seen. So how did you deal with that? What was the strategy to keep HCL afloat at that time?
So I'll give you a little bit of history. We went to HCL, our concept was to be a small fish in a big pond, rather than a big fish in a small pond. So when we were a 3 crore company, we set up a manufacturing unit in Singapore. We got pioneer status there. We were the first people to set up a computer manufacturing unit there in Singapore. I don't know, not too many people know that, but we were a 3 crore company at that time. And by the way, the model was not selling hardware. We were selling solutions. And we set up what we called SED, Software Export Division, in Madras. Now it's called Chennai. Only because there were 3 flights a week between Singapore and Madras. And so what would happen is they would write the specs there, send them to us. We would do the floppies, program them on floppies in Madras, and ship them back on a plane to Singapore, and then they'd go and implement it. That's how that whole thing worked. By the way, talking about this, software in 1980 or 81 was not considered an industry. It was considered a trade. So that unit on Hadders Road in Madras came under the Shops and Establishment Act. It didn't come under the Companies Act. And so we had to maintain these 12 registers, which we were we had no idea how to do that. But we weren't a dukan, we were a company. So Shiv decided that, I know all these people, Shiv, Kamraj Nadar, all those people in Tamil Nadu, said I'll convince them to convert it to an industry. Took 6 to 8 months, but in the meanwhile, Speak McKay had started. And Kiran Seth, who is actually a friend and a batchmate from IIT, who's really the driving force behind Speak McKay, he wanted a little publicity. And HCL we used to take out a full page ad in every newspaper in the country, major newspaper in the country, on every first Monday of every month. Right. So I had a massive advertising budget. So I talked to the advertising agency and said, look, I need a 1 column centimeter thing on page 3 of the Hindustan Times once in a while, saying Debu Chowdhury is going to perform at 4 o'clock on this date at Lady Shri Ram College, or whatever the thing was. So one day Shiv comes to me and says, what is this Speak McKay? So I thought, chori pakdi gayi hai, they say, So I asked him, why do you want to know? He said, we've got clearance for software as an industry. So I said, how did that happen? He said, because the IS people from Tamil Nadu said that if you can advertise for Speak McKay, then the company has a soul. So we'll take your word for it. So that's how software became an industry. So think of what it's done to the country after that, but that's a little bit of history. The other thing I wanted to share, just to give you a feel of the environment in those days, was, we made our 8-bit computer. In those days, we used to take 30% advance because that covered our bill of materials. And then 70%, the guy came with the check, came to our factory, looked at the machine, gave us the check, and then we would pack it and ship it. So our first customer, gentleman called Jyoti Sagar, Remfree and Son, he's got his own company now. They were a trademark attorney here in Delhi. He came, he gave us the check, and we were packing the machine. And some guy came, I forget, someone came up in the factory and said, "Have you paid your excise?" I said, "What is excise?" We were that naive actually. So he said, "Oh, there's in India, there's a production tax you've got to pay if you produce it." So we called the excise inspector and said, "Tell us whether we got to pay it ad valorem or like transformers, it was 4 annas per kilo. So how do we pay?" So he looked through the whole manual. There's no microcomputer, mini computer, microprocessor based. There's no classification. So then what do we do? He said, "You've got to write to your administrative ministry. They will write to the finance ministry. And then the finance ministry will give the notification." We said, "Yeah, you're mad. It will pretty 4 months, 4 months. We don't have, the customer wants the machine." So he said, "No, this is revenue generating for the government. They'll do it in 1 day." So we set up time. Department of Electronics had just been started. It was, electronics was supposed to be the future. And we used to work Saturdays, half days. So Saturday, we had an appointment. We went there, gave them a full presentation and said, "Hey, write a letter to the Ministry of Finance." So we were told the microprocessor policy has still not been decided. We expect it to take 4 years. So come back 4 years later, then we write the letter. So, I mean, think about it. You've got this company, you've taken money from people, what the hell is, you've got components, you're building computers. So very depressed, all of us went home, said, "Let's take that book and look at it, go through it carefully." Now, those days, foreign exchange was in tight supply. So import substitution was considered very big. And we used to buy something called an electromechanical accounting invoicing machine from Robotron in East Germany. And there was a picture of that there. It had a keyboard, it had a little printer, it had a small display and a table. So we called the excise inspector and said, "Look at this." We looked at it, look at our machine. He said, "How will it?" For 4 years, we cleared our machines as accounting invoicing machines. We sold one to Department of Electronics also. The microprocessor policy took 4 years. So those are crazy days, but that's how it's all worked. In fact, the other thing I remember is, I always tell people, is the closest I came to becoming a smuggler was when 64K DRAMs came out. And the government used to have annual budget cycles. And there used to be major cycles, no 5-year plan. Every year things would change dramatically. And so there was talk of banning import of 64K DRAMs because semiconductor complex made 16K DRAMs. Right. Fortunately, Dr. Sheshagiri, who was NIC head, he told them that, look, whatever they make gets into watches, clocks, there's no, you can allow the import because there's not enough for computers and stuff. So they didn't stop that 64K. Otherwise, I would have taken one briefcase once a quarter, come back from Singapore with the RAMs. And, but yeah, there are lots of these stories. First of all, you couldn't, banks wouldn't buy computers because the union won't allow it. So after many years, by this time the PC-80 had come out. So you remember PC-XT and then the 286 came out with the PC-80. That time there was some agreement done with the unions and they allowed PC-80s to go into the banks, but you couldn't call them computers. So they were called ALPMs, Advanced Ledger Posting Machines. They were the same computers, but they were called ALPMs. And the banks decided in their wisdom that they will buy the public sector banks from two parties, HCL, and there was a company called Usha Computers, which was Vinay Rai, that guy. So it was 60% to us, 40% to Usha, and they bought 2,000 of them, which was a big number. Then, and Usha, what they did was, they thought, hey, why am I selling to general public? So they scrapped their whole sales team, they sold only to the banks. After buying 2,000, the banks decided, enough, let's look at the impact of these before we buy any more. So Usha to Bangui, they closed down because they had nothing. So they closed down their factory and everything. And by the way, to encourage computers, the government had reduced the import duty on memory chips to 25%. So after a couple of years, the government decided, why am I losing this import duty? So they kicked it up to 140% again, which was the earlier duty. Right. Now, Usha had all these chips they had imported at 25%. They made a killing in the market selling them out at 140%, at the price that 140% was. And you know, it was unfair. They made more money than we did, making and selling computers because they had these chips that they had stored for a couple of years that they sold out. So, you know, again, the market was, the whole way business was done was completely different. Apple had a distributor in India. They never sold him. So Apple was sold really cheap. Why? Because he never imported Apple machines as Apple machines. He imported them as terminals to, print, when you got a machine that did the printing, right? That the import duty was 35%. So complete Apple computers could come in at 35% duty. Whereas when I bought parts, I paid 140% duty on them, right? And so Apple computer, he got into trouble later, company called Ramacontel, but prototype setting machines, that's what they were called. He used to get them in at 35% duty. He used to throw the CPU away and just sell the terminals. So I said that it was a different market. That's why, I mean, I don't know if it's even relevant to talk about it today. Things have changed. A lot of things have changed.
So while Shruti is going to ask questions, we can just collect the questions and then do a wrap up. Would that be okay?
Well, yeah, I can do it. I've got a little time
Okay.
since I canceled that dinner.
All right.
So my question is that, like India successfully entered into IT sector, but so like we have seen in government programs and all that, India talks about becoming the manufacturing hub for electronics, but that's not seen yet in the 70 years. So what could be the reason? Like,
Yeah, so, yeah, that's a very good question. And by the way, the only reason India became big in IT is because the government had no idea what the hell was going on. Their regulatory cycles were annual, technology cycles were faster than annual. So, but yes, so if I go back to HCL, what we did when we made our 8-bit computer, our power situation will be very good. It's very good right now compared to what it was then. Computers don't like power failures. And recovering computers from a power failure becomes a fairly complex job for a programmer. There's the JCL, and I won't get into the technical part, but it's very complex because registers get, all sorts of problems. So what we did was we built a power shut-off auto restart. We used a truck battery, and with that we built logic into the computer where when the power failed, it stopped exactly where it failed and started from exactly that point. At maximum, you might lose one line of printing buffer, but depends on which printer you had, because not all of them we could save the buffer. But the computer didn't have any problems. And so I didn't need a very experienced programmer to run the computer. And we used BASIC as an interpreter, which also made it simple. But that was specific to India. And in fact, it was specific to Pakistan, but we weren't allowed to sell to Pakistan. But our Singapore unit, saying country of origin, Singapore sold HCL computers into Pakistan. So I used to do maintenance on the phone with some of them from Singapore. But yeah, so we used to design products that were specific to India. Unfortunately, the domestic market in India at that time was not large enough. The question a lot of people ask is, why didn't India come out with some software product instead of only services? And the reason for that is that domestic market was just not large enough. You'll see products now. Now our domestic market is large enough. And now we've stepped out of electronic manufacturing completely. We are importing everything, right? Even HCL has stepped out of hardware completely. We do R&D for the whole world, but we don't make the products in India. And so what we are now trying to do is trying to Ajay, who's an HCL co-founder, and I have set up a foundation called Epic Foundation, where we are paying for the design of India-specific products. I'll give you an example. The government feels that education tablets, or they feel that rural kids have fallen behind on education because of they didn't have a smart device in 2 years, COVID and all that stuff. So technically, they're talking about 100 million tablets that they need. Now, obviously, 100 million is not going to happen, but even 1 million tablets is a huge number. So they are looking at importing or buying these tablets for rural kids. And we are trying to tell them, and some states, Odisha, Delhi have agreed, that don't buy a tablet that Samsung or Lenovo makes, which is sealed. For India, what do I mean by specifically for India? First thing is, I need it to be repairable. So I can take it to a city nearby and get it repaired, not necessarily in the village. Second thing is, I need it to be upgradable. Right? So instead of a 3-year life, can I take it to a 5-year life? Right? And the third thing is, my power situation in the rural area is still quite bad. So like the old mobile phones, I don't know how many of you remember, the battery was replaceable. Right? I need a replaceable battery on my tablet, so I can charge one while I'm using one if I need to. And so what we are doing is we are paying for that design. We are working with people to manufacture it, and we're trying to get companies to give us they won't give you the chips initially, but at least all the other parts, we want them to manufacture them in India so that we can indigenize the product. We made a big mistake in smartphones. While we claim manufacturing in India, 80% is imported. And 80% of that 80% comes from China, which right now is supposed to be a big problem. Right? We want to try and avoid that. So we've identified 10 items. And I mean, forget the price of oil today, but a year or more ago, that price of oil, my import bill on components, electronic components, would exceed the import bill on oil in 3 to 5 years. If I don't do something. So it's become an imperative to get that done. So, good question. And, we're trying to be the catalyst to get that done. I don't know if we'll be successful, but we're putting in a fair amount of money to try and push people to look at that. Biggest problem is, I don't know how to say this, but it's all these purchases are not above board. That's the biggest problem. And trying to handle, you have all these multinationals that's supposed to be not have corruption, blah, 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 but they find a way around. It's a huge issue, unfortunately. Sure.
Hi, you mentioned that according to you, being the manager is one of the most difficult jobs, and I think that's something I completely agree with. You also mentioned a very crucial aspect to that, your relationship as a boss and a friend. And I think that's something that all of us would like to know. How did you manage to kind of build a balance or set boundaries or accomplish that? Because from the way that you're saying, you did a pretty good job at it.
So, if people think you are fair, and you've got to be fair for people to think that, they accept things that they don't like from you without too much of a problem. As long as they think you're being fair and they think you are fair. So you have to find a way of being fair, of making sure that people know you're fair. Now, there's no way of acting fair, you've got to be fair. Number one. Number two, walk the talk. When you want to talk to someone or you want something from someone, don't call them to your cabin if you have a cabin. Go to their table, sit with them. Right. And what I used to do was, instead of trying to tell people all the time, you're bad here, you're good there, or whatever, I used to do one thing. I used to tell everyone, including myself, that every month on a post-it, write the one thing I'm going to do this month to improve myself, and paste it on your cube. And anyone in the office can criticize you if you're not doing that, including myself. If I don't, so it could be I'll attend meetings on time, I'll give my expense report on time or whatever. And then some people will come to you and say, I can't think of anything, I can do this much. So I used to give them a big hug and say, thank you, you made my job simple. I said, what do you mean? I said, then I don't have to give you an increment because you reached your, you can't improve yourself, then why do I pay you more? And then everyone said, I'm fine." So, the other thing is again, I have high blood pressure from both sides of the family, hypertension. And my mom and I used to be very short tempered when I was young. So my mom, who's a doctor, she sat me down one day and said, look, if you want to live life for a while, you can't, this will kill you at a younger age. So you've got to find a way to control it. And so it made, again, logic, it made sense. So first thing you do is I'll count 10. I mean, it works, but it doesn't work. So I figured that it wasn't working too many times. I was still losing my temper. So I then decided that I would look at the humorous side of everything that upset me. And now I found out that sometimes when you say something in humor, you can get the message across. A lot of people don't know if you're joking or you're serious. But they accept you're joking because they think you're serious, then it doesn't look good for them. And so the whole idea is you've got to get your message across. So you've got to find a slightly humorous way to put it out there so that everyone has a laugh, but it's not negative. So people can't put a negative thing on it and the message gets across. So my wife fights with me all the time because she claims that I get her to lose her temper without, which is probably what happens at home. It doesn't happen in the office. But yeah, but that's what ends up happening, that you keep your cool. And it's fun, especially when you're in the airlines or something, and you keep your cool, let the other person lose their temper. Let them get upset. Why should your blood pressure go? And you feel good, I feel good. Look, if that guy was rude to me, I've now knocked 5 minutes of his life by getting his blood pressure up. Hey, I've got my. So it's little mean, but.
So I had this question when you mentioned that India is basically two countries, not just one. At your time when you were in the business and really active, there would have been again two different worlds in space of gender. Progress, when gender is considered, women participation in the business. So how do you see the progress of women participation?
I come from an area where my mother was, how do I put it? She was okay. My wife is an aggressive, whatever, suffragette, whatever the hell you call it nowadays. So I have always been henpecked. So I have no idea when people tell me that men are, I've been suppressed my whole life, at home at least. So in a way, but yeah, jokes aside, I think it's a lot better than it was earlier. At least it's getting, people are talking about it. I still think that dowry and all hasn't gone away. I think we are a hypocritical country. I mean, many years ago, when I mentioned IIT Kanpur, I'd gone to IIT Kanpur to recruit in the middle of summer. And there were lots of people around on cycles and going around. I asked someone, what are they doing here? Summer, you should be out. Said, no, they're preparing for the IAS. Then why should they join the IAS? They do better dowry. Now, when you think of this and say people join the IAS for better dowry, they are the ones who are supposed to be the ones to implement no dowry. This whole concept. And so when I got married, I told my wife that I just want her with the clothes she's wearing. So no, I didn't want, no sarees, no nothing. And my mom told me that, look, I've got to give her something because people they'll want to see what they've given and they'll all comment on it. So I told her, look, I'll tell you what, show it to them, but charge them 4 annas. That way they pay, they can say what they feel like. Then there's no problem. But you get upset if they say things, but if they paid for it, then they're entitled to say whatever they like. Of course, no one really listened to all that. But yeah, I got married with 5 people. Said, and everyone tells me now that that's the way it should be. Yeah, but it caused a lot of heartburn at home. Marriages are supposed to be time when people enjoy themselves. This was, in fact, I still have the minutes of the meeting, my father-in-law, my father and I, we signed them and said, this is how it is. Of course, my mother-in-law was very upset, but then I got into her good books because he asked me, how come you decided to marry this middle child who was really the hellion in that family? And I told her, look, my dad, as I was supposed to go to the States, my dad told me, things didn't work too well then. He said, look, you get into a situation where you might have to take a decision to get married and you wouldn't want to talk to your parents. From my side, just go look at her mother and say 20, 25 years later, is that the person I want to live with? And if it's yes, I never had a problem with my mother-in-law.
Best advice.
No, but it's true. I see my wife, she used to crib about her mother, so many things. I see her becoming exactly. Yeah. And she laughs about it. When she does something that is, she's, oh, I'm behaving like my mom. How did I become an entrepreneur? I took the biggest decision of my life when I was 19. I decided who I wanted to get married to. And, I look back sometimes and think I must have been crazy. How the hell do you decide at 19 what, but I think it's the best decision of my life. And also, a lot of people ask me, why do Indians make good entrepreneurs? So again, at a slightly lighter level, but logical level, what makes a good entrepreneur? High ambiguity tolerance, high frustration tolerance. If you grow up in India, frustration tolerance is high, right? We all agree. Right. And when you look at arranged marriages, ambiguity tolerance is really high. Just think of why won't we take the biggest decision of our life, largely, depending on our team. And most of the time, we used to make it successful. Right. So I always tell people in the West, that's why we make it. So they don't laugh anymore about arranged marriages. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
So may I request the three student reps for non-academic? There is two of them are fine to, all three of us. So thank you on the behalf of ISDM, and also there is a gift bag. So.
Shaking hand. Namaste, Buddha.
That too better.
Well, my name is Kong Hei, and I'd like to speak on behalf of my colleagues. Thank you very much, sir. When every time we have said this repeatedly, a person comes from outside, we feel like we are growing, and then this is no different. And then again, every time a person comes, we are learning a lot of perspective, and then we are, learning to shape to become the person like, who is in front of us. So again, we have learned so many different things. Maybe we are building a network here, and also we are learning not only to make friends here, also, but again, to see how leaders are and to become like them again. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Malhotra, just to request the class would like to take a photograph with, if that's possible.
I could hold my breath for 10 seconds, so. it's not gonna be- Brilliant.
On the stage. Or just on the stage. They're the younger generation, they know exactly what you're doing.
Yeah. Good for you.
Singapore, right?
Sharat sir and Jaya. Want to join it?
Oh, sure.
They need to know.
Hide my ass.
If you just want to let you know, we also have Jaya, one of the people that you may have noticed. I'm an official photographer. So Jaya is basically one of the advisors, founders of ISDM and is just thankfully just come here and be. So, right. Oh. This is very fancy. Oh. I don't want to get the chairs actually, so, okay, everyone ready? No.
You ready?
No problem. Wait. There was a special request.
Are we all in the same?
Yeah, there was an iPhone, so.
I think you can join us and run.
Jo. I don't want to break the tradition. No? All right. Please keep your eyes open. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Sure.